Every Pokemon type's lore explained in 1 minute. The bug type. Spiders, worms, pine cones. If you can name an insect, these guys have got you covered. Everyone likes to buzz about how awful the bug type is, but look, they're trying their best. Sure, they have the lowest average stat total of every type, but if I had to carry the likes of Wurmple and Caterpie on my back, I'd find it hard too. Plus, they only stay in their weak forms for a couple of levels before evolving anyway. Unless your name is Volcarona, but that's fine, because their design is hard. In fact, you could argue the Unova region single-handedly revived the bug type by not only giving them all these baller designs, but also the move Quiver Dance, which boosts special attack, special defense, and speed all by one stage. But it's fine, since even if you are a pathetic bug type from an older generation, there will probably be still someone out there that appreciates you. We're still waiting on the day when we get a proper bug type legendary, although Unova did decide to come through again and deliver a cool mythical in Genesect. The Dark type. Known as the evil type in Japanese, Dark types are cunning, thieving, and won't hesitate to use underhanded tactics to assert dominance on the battlefield. Just reading out some Dark type moves is enough to make you quiver in your boots. Sucker Punch, Throat Chop, Wicked Blow. Look at this face and tell me it isn't the one of a scheming criminal mastermind. Due to their reputation, this type's Pokemon are commonly used by the series' villainous teams, and the leaders behind them. However, this does not mean all Dark types are doomed for a life of crime. With enough care and training, they respond with just as much love as any other type. Wow, great job savagely ripping out their vocal cords so they can't scream, Carvana. Dark type legendary Pokemon include Galarian Moltres, Single Strike Urshifu, and the Y-axis. But the most iconic Dark type in my opinion is Darkrai, a shadowy figure that likes to trap little children in never-ending nightmares. You guys actually like this guy? The Poison type. Toxic by name, toxic by nature. The Poison type produces some of the most heinous looking Pokemon out there. You may have heard the names of Pokemon like Muk and Garbodor come up when people discuss the worst Pokemon designs. And because I want my windows to stay unbricked, I will not be stating my opinion. Since the second episode of the Pokemon anime, Poison types have been associated with the villains of the franchise. In fact, I bet that at least 90% of the evil Team Grunt battles in this franchise contain at least one Poison or Dark type Pokemon. They should have really picked a better type though, because if you want to take over the world, you'd probably be better using a type that wasn't only super effective against grass for 17 years. Poison types have adapted to specialize in whittling down their opponents slowly. Their best method of doing so? The move Toxic. This was a move that back in the day almost every Pokemon learned, so I'll leave it up to you to figure out what that implies. I'm just gonna say it. Being an electric type must be horrible. The minute you wake up and look down from your bed, you get instantly jump scared, because their only weakness in this entire franchise is the ground. Well, and shadow Pokemon, but we'll get to them later. So what else do electric types have going for them? Well, when they're not being the mascot of the biggest grossing media franchise of all time, a lot of their effectiveness comes from their close relationship with the speed stat. There are plenty of Duracell bunnies from this section of the type chart that hit incredibly high speeds, and when they're not going fast, you'll find them turning their opponents into cripples with the status condition paralysis. They say the Lightning in Lightning McQueen's name was inspired by electric type Pokemon. It's also said that McQueen has a picture of Regieleki on his wall. Now they are speed. I mean, even their babies are supercharged.
How old are you?
9.
You're very good at walking into walls?
Yeah.
Let's see you walk into a wall.
The Fairy type debuted 10 years ago in Pokemon X and Y, a statement that makes me feel like an absolute fossil. I remember watching it when it was first revealed a couple months after Sylveon's trailer and going, what is this, Winx Club? Due to their late arrival to the party, a lot of pre-X and Y Pokemon that had serviceable levels of cuteness were retroactively given the Fairy type, either as a secondary typing or straight up getting their original typing stripped from them like it never existed. Clefable was always immune to Dragon Pulse. Like any character from a children's storybook, Fairy types hate toxicity, fire, and 2000 Honda Civics, but are incredibly strong against fighting, dark, and dragon types. You know, because at the end of a fairy tale, the evil dragon is always slain. This typing was Game Freak's attempt to stop the competitive scene from looking like an episode of How to Train Your Dragon, while also buffing the underwhelming poison type. And it worked. maybe a little too well. The fire type. This will be one of the 3 starter types we cover in this video, and it just so happens to contain the best starter we've ever seen. Fires in the Pokemon world behave much like their real life counterparts. Under the right conditions, such as harsh sunlight, their potential damage output is absolutely devastating, enough to comfortably overwhelm even its resistances. However, under unfavorable conditions, the fire type's effectiveness in battle can be significantly neutered. Successful methods of fire protection in the Pokeverse include the rain, and these pointy floating rocks that deal a quarter of a fire type's health when they're swapped into battle. This duality means fire types are very much all or nothing. Since the introduction of the fairy type, things have gotten better, but if you were a fire type in the early generations that wasn't fast or strong, your flight to Guangdong province is now boarding. I mean, Flareon's been living there since 1996. It's a bird? It's a plane? Nah, I was right the first time. It's a bird. There's one rule with the flying type. You've got to be able to ascend past the clouds, granting them full immunity to ground type moves. And every single Pokemon bar 2 follow this rule. Helicopter, helicopter! Since that's all a flying type really requires to feel validated, this type encompasses a wide variety of designs. From the outskirts of towns to caves to the deep sea, flying types can be found pretty much anywhere, even in space. Their sheer availability, combined with their relatively inoffensive designs and high speed stats, make this type one of the most commonly used by players, especially in early generations, when the Hidden Machine Fly was required to fast travel between towns and cities. Even if it was a random level 14 Pidgey you kept in the PC, you would struggle to have fun with no flying types in your team. The Ghost type. Spooky season is well and truly among us, folks. Well, it would have been if I got this video out on time. Ghost Pokemon exist on a different mortal plane from us, and therefore themselves and the normal type can't interact in any way. On the other side of the type chart, they find themselves preyed upon by dark types and other ghosts. You really can't trust anyone these days. It was a common misconception in early years that ghost types were also weak to psychic, but that's just because every single ghost in Generation 1 was also part poison type. Since then, this rogues gallery has expanded significantly, and I have to say, Pokemon's design team has done all the dead people in the world a great justice with how cool some of these guys look. Just stay away from any Pokedex entries if you don't want their images to be tainted. But maybe that makes you like them more. In that case, you should probably touch some grass. Speaking of which, the grass type. While they're often seen as inferior compared to their fire and water counterparts, that's not to say they're bad by any means. Grass contains a wide variety of plant life, including mushrooms, cacti, and trees. The main design philosophy behind this type is that they're self-sufficient, keeping themselves fit and healthy through recovery moves or moves that drain the life force of other Pokemon. Gaining this skill was a crucial gift from the Pokegods, seeing as they're weak to absolutely everything, and their attacks are resisted by 6 different types. That isn't to say damage dealing grass types don't exist, but usually the most successful ones are capable of taking a hit or two, and then significantly disrupting the enemy's team. Not the most flashy way of playing the game, but it's honest work. You could argue this work wasn't appreciated though, as the grass type didn't get a legendary Pokemon until Virizion in Black and White, and they didn't get a good legendary Pokemon until Ogerpon a year ago. We've reached my personal favourite, the normal type. Ha! The normal type? What are you? An NPC? Are you Larry? Well, excuse me if I think it's hilarious that there's a whole category that's gimmick is that they're just regular dudes. They're not harnessing any ancient elemental energy powers or researching evil schemes and martial arts. They'll just slap you with the neutral damage they deliver to 15 of the 18 types. It's no surprise then that the normal type mainly consists of real-life mammals and humanoid Pokemon. And before you get any ideas, no, that's not why I like the type. It's just really funny to see a kangaroo with parenting issues supplex some of the strongest Pokemon in existence. Plus, come on now, mine and Licky Licky's relationship is purely platonic. That's not all though. For some reason, normal types have the widest compatibility with technical machines out of everyone, meaning that the range of moves they can learn is quite frankly bizarre. Want to see this sloth summon a blizzard? Sure, whatever. I don't care anymore. Breaking news. The robot uprising is officially upon us. I hope you put please at the end of your ChatGPT requests. Otherwise, run for the hills. Oh. False alarm, it was just some steel type Pokemon. Steel is considered by many the premier defensive typing of the game, with their Pokemon having the highest average defense amongst all types. As of 2024, the steel type resists normal, flying, rock, bug, steel, grass, psychic, ice, dragon, and fairy type attacks, and is immune to poison and being poisoned. It isn't like steel types are particularly bad offensively either, which begs the question, what's the downside of all this power? Well, Steel's three weaknesses are fire, ground, and fighting, who we've already established in this video as being some of the most offense-oriented types in these games. For all those premier attackers, this typing is nothing more than a wall to be easily punched through. You know when you were a kid zoning off in class and you would have those random thoughts like, what would a Pokemon with every type look like? Well, here's your answer. You can't really talk about the Stellar type without first mentioning terastallization, a mechanic in Scarlet and Violet where you can terastallize your Pokemon. This transformation changes their typing, a move called Terrablast typing, and gives them a little hat. The second Scarlet and Violet DLC introduced Stellar terastallization. That doesn't change the user's type, but turns the move Terrablast into the brand new Stellar type. Stellar attacks deal neutral damage against every type, but are super effective against Pokemon that are in the terastallized state. Something I correctly predicted months ago before it came out, by the way. Like Shadow Pokemon, there are no official Stellar type Pokemon. The closest we get is a unique form of Terapagos, the legendary and the focus of the second half of the Scarlet and Violet DLC. To be fair, you have to have a very high IQ to understand Psychic Pokemon. The typing is extremely subtle, and without a solid grasp of Generation 1 history, most of the jokes around them will go over a typical trainer's head. There's also Mewtwo's nihilistic outlook, which is definitely woven into his characterization. Yeah, alright, joke's over. Psychic Pokemon have big brains and thus big special attack stats. They use these blessings to trick and confuse their opponents, sometimes to the extent where they start bonking themselves on the head. They were completely overpowered in Generation 1 since they only resisted themselves, and their only weakness was the bug type, and well, you can probably guess how that ends. This led to Pokemon introducing not one, but two types in the second generation that hard countered them and ended their reign of terror. So Psychics aren't overpowered anymore, but they're still a key part of the franchise, being home to a lot of extremely iconic legendary and mythical Pokemon, such as Mew, and Mew, the sequel. Okay, I know like a lot of our world is made out of rock, but did they really need a Pokemon type? Yes. Yes, they did. Rock types are weak to grass, fighting, and water, but resist fire, normal, and flying type attacks. This makes them perfect first boss material, as they quickly force the player to learn just how important type matchups are in the series. Outside of their role as a babysitter, the rock type is regarded as a bit of a joke compared to all the others. Not just because it has two extra weaknesses that I failed to mention, but also due to a lot of their Pokemon's designs being on the slightly goofy side. Even their most popular legendary Pokemon, Regirock's fame, comes from them being well and truly memed at every opportunity. There are some things you don't joke about though, and back in the day, Stealth Rock was one of them. This entry hazard did rock type damage every time a Pokemon swapped in. Also, there's like no 100% accurate rock type moves. I'm not sure why that is, but yeah. The Shadow type? Yeah, that's right, even the spin-offs aren't safe from this video. Shadow Pokemon were Pokemon that had their hearts corrupted by the villains in everyone's favourite games they've never played, Pokemon Colosseum and its sequel, XD Gale of Darkness. Since these animals are technically in a state of constant agony, it is considered morally acceptable to steal them from other trainers. That way they can be purified over time by that sweet power of friendship. In XD, a wide variety of Shadow type moves moves were added that dealt super effective damage against every single Pokemon type unless they themselves were corrupted too. However, despite popular misinformation, no Pokemon has ever been the Shadow type, instead opting to keep their original typing even when corrupted. Shadow Lugia, the poster child for Shadow Pokemon, was always secretly just LARPing as an edgelord. The Ice type. Ice type Pokemon embrace the coldness of life, and it's no wonder considering there's dozens of YouTube videos that call them fundamentally flawed. I'm gonna shorten them down for you to explain why Ice types were pretty cheeks. Number 1, the only type they resist is themselves. And number 2, they're weak to 4 different types. Their attacks have pretty good offensive coverage though, so people often theorize they're the glass cannons of the Pokemon world, doing big damage while risking being knocked out in the process. This design philosophy failed for a number of reasons, but the main one was that most ice types were so slow, they'd just get melted before they could lift a finger. And it wasn't until Generation 9 when some of their problems began to fall. A new weather effect called Snow was introduced that boosted Ice type's defense by 50%. This damage relief combined with the Ice type move Aurora Veil halving all damage taken by your team has finally given the cold creatures some room to breathe. The Ground type. Ground types have one objective and one objective only. Their moves deal super effective damage against 5 types, and are only resisted or nullified by 3. So, statistically speaking, spamming ground type moves is a pretty viable strategy in a Pokemon battle. This method is reinforced by the type's number 1 go-to move, Earthquake. With 100 base power and 100% accuracy, it's one of the strongest moves in the game that has absolutely no drawback. If a Pokemon with high attack can learn Earthquake, it probably carries it in competitive. Unlike the Grass type, it's kinda hard what obvious connection all the Ground type Pokemon have. What's the main thing that links Flygon to Quagsire and then links Quagsire to the legendary embodiment of land itself, Groudon? After close observation and analysis, I came to the conclusion that if the Mon likes rolling around in the mud, they have a pretty good shot of being part ground type. Yes, that's right, that includes Groudon too. The Fighting type. Unlike a traditional element, these creatures embrace the power of beating each other up. From martial artists like Sork to street brawlers such as Scrafty, one thing they have in common is their physical attack is usually their highest stat. Unless they want to be a bit edgy like Lucario. Their fists deal super effective damage against rock, steel, ice, and normies, but struggle against psychic, fairy, ghost, bug, and flying. Come on man, you're seriously going to fight a pigeon? That's totally not cool. After almost 30 years of Pokemon content, fighting types are still finding creative ways to beat each other up effectively. Examples include Conkeldurr bonking people on the head with concrete pillars, or Annihilate literally coming back from the dead because they have so much fighting left to do. So in summary, they're pretty much the entire cast of Dragon Ball. The Dragon type is more or less the opposite of the Bug type. While the Dragons excel in stats, resistances, and being a useful asset in battle, they're often held back by their lack of practical use. You'll find them in the deepest room of an optional dungeon, accompanied with a low catch rate and the slowest possible leveling rate of gaining experience. To make matters worse, their final forms are usually locked behind stupidly high level requirements, usually in the 50s. But I promise you, those 2 fights in the story where you get to use it in its final evolution are pretty fun. The Dragon type may as well be called a legendary type, as every generation since 3 has at least one Dragon type legendary present. It is in my humble opinion that they should also be referred to as the fraud type, because come on now. This is a palm tree, this is a bridge, and this is a dinosaur. The only thing draconic about them is the meteor they're about to be turned into a statistic by. The Water type. It seems I've accidentally saved the largest for last because water type Pokemon make up 15% of all Pokemon in the game. It just so happens that water is also Junichi Masuda's favourite typing. I'm sure there's nothing going on there. Water types contain creatures that live above the water, in the water, and at the bottom of the water. You'll most likely see them in Pokemon media being used as makeshift boats and submarines, letting trainers cross the seas in a morally questionable way. Their biggest strength on the battlefield is their lack of weaknesses, only being scared by grass and electric types. Now if oil spills were a Pokemon type, this would be a different story. In Generation 5, water Pokemon were gifted with the incredibly overpowered move Scald, an 80 base power move that had a 30% chance to burn the target and cut their attack in half. One use of this attack could flip a game on its head, so Pokemon did the honourable thing and gutted it from a lot of Pokemon's move pools. And that is all the type. Hey, aren't you forgetting someone? I already told you, oil spills aren't a type. No, come on. I still exist. Okay, fine. It's a common misconception that question mark type represents the state of having no type or being typeless, like when an Arcanine uses the move Burn Up to get rid of its fire typing. So then, what is it? Well, it's a type that I guess exists in some capacity. It used to be the type of Generation 2 move Curse, because the move has two different effects depending on if you're a Ghost type or not. But Game Freak switched it to a Ghost type move in Generation 5 after realizing it was very dumb. In Generation 3, only eggs possessed the typing, even if you knew exactly what was inside them. And in Generation 4, Arceus had a version with the question mark colour scheme, but it was unable to be used in battle, even when hacking, and it hasn't appeared ever since. And that is every type summed up in 1 minute.